Hello friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Riya Gandhi and I'm here to help you in your journey to crack UGC NET English exam. In today's video, we are going to break down one of the most complex and daunting topics of English literature, which scares a lot of students, and that is metaphysical poetry. In this video, we are going to discuss some of its key characteristics and also dive deep into some of the key poets of metaphysical poetry. Stick around till the end of this video and maybe you will realize that metaphysical poetry was not even that hard that you were thinking it to be. Before we begin our discussion on metaphysical poetry and understand some of the most important metaphysical poets, let's break down the word metaphysical. The word meta basically means after. So the literal translation of the word metaphysical means after the physical. So metaphysics as a branch of philosophy basically deals with the questions that are beyond the reach of physics or that are beyond the reach of science. Questions like, does God even exist? What constitutes in the nature of our reality? What is our reality? Is there a difference between reality and perception? A variety of topics related to spirituality, religion, philosophy are related to metaphysics, but all of them are subsumed under the main idea of understanding the nature of reality. Based upon this understanding of metaphysics as a branch of philosophy, we realize that metaphysical poetry basically deals with such religious, philosophical, and sensual ponderings. One of its most common characteristics of metaphysical poetry is its large doses of wit. It is highly intellectual because of the knowledge base that the poets had during that point of time, and because of which sometimes metaphysical poetry is also considered to be very ambiguous. The chief functions of such kind of poetry was to shock the readers, to wake them up from the dream-like reality that they are living in and question the unquestionable. At the same time, they did not just focus upon making the readers feel like the poets belonging from the previous era or the Elizabethan era. They wanted to make the readers think and feel. How did they do that? They basically focused upon language and the structure of the poem. They used weird paradoxes and puns, but crafted them with the ordinary speech. They yoked together two dissimilar, incompatible objects together in just one poem to shock the readers. And that was called as a conceit. What is a conceit? A conceit is a subtype of metaphor, or you can even say an exaggerated or an extended metaphor where two very obviously dissimilar objects are compared together to make the readers think and feel. Now these objects are so far-fetched, like comparing a fly to a physical expression of love, or comparing two lovers to a particular compass. These are completely far-fetched ideas and it just seems weird. But it was only through this that they sort of tried to shock the readers. This was extremely jarring in terms of what the readers or what the audience expected with the Elizabethan poets. But with the arrival of metaphysical poetry, things started to change completely. It became highly speculative, highly intellectual, and constituted an exaggerated amount of thought and feeling that they banged upon through language, through paradoxes, puns, extended metaphors like conceits, and because of which metaphysical poetry has become highly ambiguous in its time. Did you know that it was actually the Scottish writer William Drummond of Hawthornden who somewhere around 1630 used the term metaphysical for the first time to refer to a group of poets who followed that style of poetry? However, he used the term in a very derogatory sense. He objected to the characteristics of metaphysical poetry, calling them to be scholastic quiddities. John Dryden, on the other hand, used the term to criticize John Donne's poetry specifically. He said that John Donne's poetry is affecting the metaphysics in 17th century and confusing the minds of women by his nice speculations of philosophy when he should just be engaging their hearts with the softness of love. It was finally in the 18th century when one of the most important critiques of English literature, Dr. Samuel Johnson, coined the term metaphysical poetry in one of his most important works, Lives of the Eminent English Poets. In this particular book also, Johnson used the term metaphysical poetry in a very pejorative sense. He referred to the metaphysical poets including John Donne, George Herbert, Richard Crashaw, Andrew Marvell and Henry Vaughan. Did you know that Samuel Johnson began his discussion in this particular book with Abraham Cowley, describing him to be the last of the metaphysicals and the first of the moderns? So you see that throughout the 17th and the 18th centuries, the word metaphysical and metaphysical poetry was used in a very pejorative, was used in a very derogatory sense. But now we approach metaphysical poetry with certain kind of appreciation. The lookout towards metaphysical poetry, especially in academia, has completely shifted. How did that shift come about? We need to thank T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot, in his most influential work, The Metaphysical Poets, published in 1921, appreciated the writing style of the metaphysical poets. He said that in the poems written by such poets, you will find a fusion of thought as well as feeling. This is what we previously discussed in the video as well. That metaphysical poets do not only want their readers to think or just feel, they want their readers to think as well as feel. According to T.S. Eliot, this is what he called as the union of sensibility. T.S. Eliot also argues that after the metaphysical poets, you cannot find this union of sensibility in any of the poets, which is what he has called as the dissociation of sensibility. Either the focus is too much on intellect or thought, or the focus is too much upon feeling and emotion. That union which should be there between thought and feeling and which he found in metaphysical poetry, he did not find in any later works of poetry after that. Because of which he appreciated the metaphysical poets, and because of that our attitude now towards metaphysical poetry has completely changed. Now that we have a basic understanding of the word metaphysical and we have also discussed some of the key characteristics of metaphysical poetry, it's time to dive deep into discussing 5 of the most important metaphysical poets. When it comes to the important metaphysical poets, you should remember that they were spread throughout the years. Unlike Elizabethan poets or modernist poets, they do not belong to one particular age. Rather, they belong to 2 of the most important ages in the history of English literature, Jacobean age and Caroline age. Jacobean age was the age when King James I, who was actually James VI of Scotland, ruled England, and Caroline age was the age when Charles I ruled England and was later beheaded in 1649 by the Puritans. In this video, the 5 most important metaphysical poets that we are going to discuss from UGC NET point of view are John Donne, George Herbert, Richard Crashaw, Andrew Marvell, and Henry Vaughan. The first important metaphysical poet that we are going to discuss in this video is John Donne. John Donne is considered to be a rebel when it comes to his poetry. He was very intolerant of the same old conventional ways of writing poetry, and so he did away with the Spenserian tradition of writing poetry. The Spenserian tradition basically refers to Spenser's way of writing poetry, especially in the Elizabethan age, in which he adopted a very refined language, a very courtly language, and he used a very refined accent, meter, and stuff like that. Now, Donne was very intolerant of all of this, so he did away with that and he deliberately adopted a colloquial language and used a very rough and crabbed meter. This was so revolutionary and unconventional for years even that Ben Jonson said that for not keeping the accent, Donne deserved hanging. When it comes to John Donne's works, he has provided two of the most popular works in English literature. The first is Anniversaries, which was published in 1611 and 1612, and the second poetry collection is Holy Sonnets, which constitutes of the religious poems written in essentially Petrarchan manner and appeared in 1633. Apart from these poetry collections, some of the most popular poems written by John Donne are A Valediction, Forbidding Morning, The Sun Rising, Death Be Not Proud, The Expiration, and more, which are extremely important from UGC NET English point of view, and I would suggest that you go through them in detail. There was no one of equal wit and equal poetic style that could match the significance of John Donne's metaphysical poetry, especially in the Jacobean age. It was years later in the Caroline age that you see the emergence of various groups of poets that could match the significance of John Donne's poetry, and they could be clubbed under the name metaphysical poetry. Now, when we are talking about the poetry of the Caroline age, it can be divided into two groups. That is, a religious group of poetry and the cavalier or the non-religious group of poetry. When it comes to the religious group of poets, they basically focused upon the individual's faith in God, their spiritual progress and perseverance. These poets are George Herbert, Richard Crashaw, and Henry Vaughan. When we are talking about the cavalier poets or the non-religious group of poets, they basically focused upon the secular themes of gallantry, chivalry, and the main theme they focused upon was carpe diem. When we are talking about carpe diem, it basically means seize the day. Be very opportunistic with your day. Live your day to the fullest and live it as if it's your last. George Herbert is considered to be one of the most devout, religious and metaphysical poets of the 17th century. One of the most important things that you should remember about George Herbert is that his poems are not just emotional responses to God. Rather, they are personal responses to his God. He builds a personal relationship with God rather than focusing upon any religious institution or organized religion. He focuses upon building a very personal and transcendental relationship with God, which is quite similar in India, wherein you had the poets of the Bhakti movement like Mirabai and Sant Kabir Das Ji, who focused upon building that transcendental relationship that goes beyond any religious institution. When it comes to remembering George Herbert's poetry collection, you only have to remember one major poetry collection, and that is Temple, which was published in 1633 posthumously. The next important metaphysical poet that we are going to discuss in this video is Richard Crashaw. When it comes to Richard Crashaw, he is popularly known for his vibrant style of writing. One of the most interesting things about Richard Crashaw is that he was very much influenced with the Italian and Spanish mystics, and his work has a lot of similarities with Baroque poets. If on one hand George Herbert wrote The Temple, you have Richard Crashaw writing The Steps to the Temple. And he divided this work, that is Steps to the Temple, into two parts, religious as well as secular. He was also very influenced by Saint Teresa of Avila, and he has written 3 poems including a hymn to the name and honor of Saint Teresa. The next important metaphysical and religious poet that we are going to discuss in this video is Henry Vaughan. Henry Vaughan was also a poet of the 17th century, but he was discovered only later in 1847. One of the most important things that you need to remember about Henry Vaughan is that he introduced slant rhyme or half rhyme in the poetry of English literature. He was also very much inspired by George Herbert's poetry collection, The Temple, and because of which he also published his poetry collection Silex Scintillans, which appeared in 1650. Apart from this poetry collection, Henry Vaughan is also known for the most important poem from UGC NET point of view, and that is The Retreat. When it comes to understanding Henry Vaughan's poetry, you need to remember that it was not filled with a lot of anxieties and fear and their relationship with God. Rather, it focused more upon the childhood innocence. And finally, the last and the most important, the widely read poet after John Milton and John Donne is Andrew Marvell. One of the most interesting things that you need to remember of Andrew Marvell is that he was actually an assistant to John Milton as a Latin secretary of Oliver Cromwell's Council of State. He joined it in 1657. By that point of time, John Milton had already gone blind, and in fact, Andrew Marvell was one of the people who had petitioned to have John Milton freed from prison during the Restoration period. So you can see that John Milton and Andrew Marvell shared a very close relationship. And in this close relationship, Andrew Marvell also started writing poems in praise of Oliver Cromwell. One of the most popular and widely anthologized poems of Andrew Marvell is To His Coy Mistress. No one can capture the theme of Carpe Diem as effectively as Andrew Marvell has done in this particular poem. These were the 5 most important metaphysical poets from UGC NET point of view. You should go through them in detail and understand their works before you appear for your UGC NET English exam. There are other important metaphysical poets like Thomas Traherne, John Cleveland, Abraham Cowley, and more, which are also equally important from UGC NET point of view. If you want to go through their works in detail, understand them, and master metaphysical poetry for your UGC NET English exam, don't worry, I've got you covered. I am taking live UGC NET English exam classes wherein I'm sharing certain essential tips and strategies which help me crack UGC NET English exam in just first attempt. Not only that, but I'm also providing personalized guidance tailored to your needs and requirements, which will help you in your journey to crack UGC NET English exam. I'm also providing explanations, detailed explanations of every topic and concept related to the history of British English literature and literary criticism in a very simplified manner. Remembering the dates and the published years would just become extremely effortless and very natural. If you want to know more about the courses I offer, the sessions I take, and the notes I provide, feel free to check out my TopMate page at topmate.io/Riya Gandhi. I've shared the link in the description box below, so don't forget to check it out. That's it for today's video, folks. If you found this video informative and helpful, please like it and share it with other UGC NET English aspirants. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any videos on such important topics that I will be uploading in the future. Thank you so much for watching till the end. I'll see you in the next one.